As John Milton, the 17th century wordsmith and dreamer, so painstakingly penned in his crowning glory of an epic poem, Paradise Lost, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Blasphemy, surely, for a piece of literature originally published back in 1667, which fictionalized the fall of the angel Satan down into the pit of Tartarus after being defeated and banished by the forces of heaven. Even in terms of fiction as an allegorical vessel for the inner turmoil of the human soul, historically speaking, John Milton risked life and limb to fantasize such a story. Although Dante did the same several centuries earlier in the Divine Comedy, the fictional forces of both heaven and hell had never been before so polarized in a work of literature as they were in Paradise Lost. Well, since then, things have changed quite a bit, so let's take a look at one of the more iconic depictions of angels and demons in modern fiction, Diablo. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host, Jack Finch. Today, in this latest episode of The Lore Explored, we take a look at the fiction behind the Diablo franchise. Roll the clip.
The armies of light and shadow will clash across the fields of eternity.
Stay a while and listen. You see, for the curious amongst you, of course, we couldn't kickstart this particular episode without giving some form of cameo credit to the lorekeeper himself, the late great legend of all things Immaterium, Deckard Cain. For the even curiouser amongst you though, of course we should also paint the picture of just exactly what we're talking about here. And for those of you that don't know, the Diablo franchise is a series of video games first published by Blizzard Entertainment back in 1996. Later in the year 2000, it was followed by Diablo 2 and then Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, the greatest of the franchise in my opinion, and finally 2008's Diablo 3, which was pretty good but no nip on nostalgia. You see, the hype surrounding this and the most important reason for us to bring the awesome Diablo lore to the forefront is because recently the fourth entry in the franchise has been revealed. Personally, I'm not impressed by what I've seen so far of Diablo 4, but whatever you think about Blizzard as a once mighty franchise, there is no denying the fact that where their expertise truly shines is in telling a damn good story, and the remarkable lore behind Diablo is no exception. Really, perhaps more so than any other games publisher, Blizzard are masters of their craft, and the lore behind Diablo is some of the finest in dark fantasy fiction. And of course, what better place to begin a tale of good and evil than with the purest essence of the two. In the beginning there was nothing save for a single pearl, and in that pearl there slept a dreaming, mighty, unfathomable spirit, Anu, the One. The very first being of creation, Anu was the sum of all things, both good and evil, light and dark, the physical and the mystical, joy and sadness, all of them personified in the crystallization of this perfect being. You see, Anu, in its state of total purity and perfection, over boundless eons cast all evil from itself, and for a perfect moment in time and space, all manners of dissonance and evil was gone. But just as matter cannot be created nor destroyed, neither can the energy of evil. In the void of existence, soon enough, the discordant fragments that Anu had cast out formed themselves into another being, Tathamet, the first of the prime evils. Now, although they were separated, they were bound within the same pearl of existence, and so they waged a war of light and shadow against each other for countless millennia, neither of them ever gaining the upper hand. This is known as the Great Conflict, the underlying and most important dichotomy in the whole of the Diablo franchise. You see, the energies that were unleashed in the impossible war ignited an explosion of light and matter so vast and terrible that it birthed the very universe itself. And here we have the very first of the many planes of existence that make up the Diablo franchise, in a realm known as Pandemonium, forged by the resulting cataclysm of Anu and Tathamet as they delivered their final blows to each other, laying the foundation for all of creation. In the aftermath, the great bodies of these entities made up the physicality of the plane of Pandemonium. Anu's shining spine formed the crystal arch, and the high heavens formed around it. On the other hand, excuse the pun, Tathamet's broken corpse formed the basis of the burning hells, and as these seeds were both sown, these two realms of Pandemonium eventually gave birth to angels and demons, respectively. There was one relic left behind though that would become integral to this great conflict, Anu's eye, a remainder from the broken bones of his corpse that would later become what is known as the World Stone, an artifact of such incredible power that it could give birth to entire worlds of creation. And so as imperfect beings, both angels and demons sought the World Stone to become the de facto force of Pandemonium, and another great war waged for millennia. In the process, the Pandemonium fortress was built to house the World Stone, but the artifact changed hands many times, eventually leading to one of the most important moments in the lore of the Diablo series, and one which features a little known character that will heavily influence the direction of the newest Diablo 4 installment. Lilith, a name which many of you may be familiar with. You see, after eons of battle and needless bloodshed, one angel, Inarius, he grew tired of this eternal conflict. Inarius was an archangel of the high heavens, heavily respected and part of the Enigris Council, the right hand of heaven. He was also the brother of Tyrael, perhaps one of the most iconic characters in the series, and even attempted to persuade him to put down his own sword and leave the great conflict behind. None of the archangels would listen to him though, Tyrael included, and so instead Inarius turned to those amongst the demons who also felt the same way. Lilith, queen of the succubi and daughter of Mephisto, also grew tired of the endless conflict, and together Inarius and Lilith led these angel and demon rebels through one of the most important periods of Diablo lore. Together in an act of unprecedented rebellion, the angel Inarius and the demon Lilith stole the World Stone, fled from Pandemonium, and in the process they created Sanctuary, the world in which the vast bulk of Diablo is set, a place far away from the warring ways of heaven and hell and the eternal conflict of good and evil. In this brave new world, Inarius and Lilith would later fall in love with each other, as did many of the other rebel angels and demons, and from these angelic and demonic unions, the Nephilim were born, the first generation of human beings. And for those of you that have played Diablo 3, you'll know that the Nephilim are pretty integral toward the player character throughout the series, but hey, forget about that. Let's not ruin the immersion, right? You see, this didn't last long, and it seemed that the tremors of the same conflict that both Inarius and Lilith had fled from had managed to seep into Sanctuary too. Their children, the Nephilim, possessed incredible innate powers, perhaps enough to one day rival and surpass that of both angels and demons. On one hand, Lilith saw their incredible potential, and she realized that given enough attention, the Nephilim could grow to such a point that one day they could overthrow both heaven and hell, and together they could bring an end to the great conflict and the endless eternal struggle. On the other, Inarius feared them greatly, and he wanted to kill them all. As a result, eventually, after Lilith had slaughtered all of Inarius' angelic allies, he used the power of the World Stone to cast her for eternity into the void, where he intended for her to stay imprisoned for all of time. If you know anything about the Diablo series though, it's pretty difficult to keep a good demon down. Now what follows is a period in the Diablo lore known as the Sin War, and it is an incredibly complex conflict that we couldn't do justice to unless it had a video of its own. It takes place in the trilogy of novels by Richard A. Knack, released from 2006 onwards, featuring Birthright, Scales of the Serpent, and finally The Veiled Prophet. They're remarkably well written, and if you're feeling some Diablo lore, they come highly recommended actually. As you may imagine, covering an entire trilogy of novels takes a moment or two to do, but for the sake of framing this section of the lore explored correctly, excuse the spark notes. Essentially, throughout the Sin War, Lilith managed to return to Sanctuary from her prison, where she then raised the Nephilim into her own personal army in an attempt to defeat Inarius once and for all. Ultimately, she fails, where Inarius casts her once again into the void, but if the cinematic trailer of Diablo 4 is anything to go by, yeah, she's making a bit of a comeback. Inarius, on the other hand, although victorious, was in for a far worse fate. At the climax of the Sin War, Inarius was eventually driven to madness as he waged a war against Lilith's Nephilim army, championed by a figure known as Odyssean, and in the process most of Sanctuary was turned asunder. As they battled with each other, the angels of heaven eventually intervened, tearing open the sky and bringing an end to the conflict. As a result, Odyssean, he cast both angels and demons from Sanctuary once and for all, and the Enigris Council of the Archangels began to broker the fate of both the Nephilim and the now fallen angel Inarius. Some of the Nephilim, like Rathma, son of Lilith and the first Necromancer, pleaded with heaven to spare Sanctuary, and as a result, a vote was held between the angels. Imperius, the Archangel of Valor and the de facto leader of them, voted against Sanctuary's existence. Auriel, Archangel of Hope, she voted for it. The deciding factor was laid before Tyrael, Inarius' own brother, who initially seemed to show little love for humanity and the Nephilim. Together, ultimately though, they agreed to an armistice between the high heavens and the burning hells. As Tyrael decided, inspired by Odyssean's sacrifice, Sanctuary should be free to live on its own, with no war brought there by either heaven or hell. From then on, humanity would be free to choose for themselves how to move forward as a people, free from the interference of both angels and demons, free to walk the path of both order and chaos. However, there was a caveat to Tyrion's proposal, and in turn for agreeing the terms of the armistice, Mephisto, one of the three prime evils, the demon lord of hatred and the father of Lilith himself, wanted vengeance for his daughter's imprisonment in the void. And so Inarius was given over to Mephisto's custody, and what followed was one of the most brutal punishments in the entire Diablo series. As the first Diablo video game explains, he bound Inarius with tremendous chains and slowly tore the wings from the back of the angel. Great barbed hooks were then used to stretch out the once glowing skin, and his features were distorted by vile powers. Many of the followers of Inarius were given as gifts to both Baal and Diablo, and the rest were molded to match the bloated image of the now crippled angel. To this day, Inarius is said to be trapped in hell within a chamber of mirrors, his eyelids torn from his face as he is forced to gaze upon his misshapen form for all of eternity. Yeah, exactly. Pretty freaking harsh punishment, right? But as you'll know, you probably shouldn't go messing about with the daughter of a prime evil, really. Nevertheless, whatever the repercussions, the stage was set for the emergence of the Diablo series. Sanctuary would become the blank slate in which this proxy war of both heaven and hell would be continuously fought. And despite an uneasy truce, it's seen that the embers of the great conflict were never fully stamped out. You see, as so far as demons are concerned, the pursuit of power could never truly be sated. The three prime evils of hell, Diablo, Mephisto, and Baal, were dethroned by their lesser denizens. During this moment of peace against the angels, the four lesser evils of hell, Asmodan, Belial, and Dariel and Juriel, saw their opportunity to usurp them, and in the process ultimately exiled the three prime evils into the world of Sanctuary. And of course, that is where our setting for the first Diablo game takes place. After the Haradrim, under the guidance of the Archangel Tyrael, establish a defense against the seeping evils of hell by binding them all to powerful magical artifacts, soul stones, Diablo, Lord of Terror, and Destroyer of Souls included. And what does it take to keep all of that at bay? How do you hold back the devious machinations of both angels and demons alike? What will it take to save Sanctuary from the scheming wills of an almighty power? Well, you, of course. A hero. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our long look at the origin behind the incredible Diablo series, and one that will no doubt need an update following the release of Diablo 4, probably sometime next year. Obviously, there is a lot more to it, and we've only just bridged the gap between the origin story and the original game, but hey, that's reason enough to go and play and find out for yourself. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from our last lore explored entry, the Werewolf. First up, Ted Bosley says, Jack, in all honesty, I think you'd be a great werewolf. Well, thank you, Ted. I think you're a great Ted. And finally, Matthew Richard says, where did you get that Toronto badge? I must have one. We always make fun of the way people living in Toronto say Toronto. Yeah, it took some getting used to for me as well. The patch that you're referring to though is from an awesome Toronto-based company called The Button Machine. Check out some of their stuff because they're awesome. Consider this a shout out. Well, on that note, unfortunately that's all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button as well as that subscribe button, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.